The definition of hell is meeting the person you could have become.
What we went through is actually what developed our thought processes and how we are.
You can't go to an investor meeting and not have any answers. Know what your zone of genius is. I have a rule, and people should just do this and save yourself $3,000 a month as a client. But like, why the fuck are you doing this, right? And if your answer is for a fucking car to stand in front of on Instagram, or like if that's your answer, you're so gone.
Jeremy Delk, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Patrick. Excited to be here.
So, entrepreneur extraordinaire. I always lead in with my podcast is that the bios never do justice to who you are, what you do, of course, and things change. So if somebody says to Jeremy today, so Jeremy, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Yeah, it's a tough one. It depends on my audience. Typically, I'll kind of layer in and say, if I'm talking to someone in real estate, I'm a real estate developer. But I think that the most broad macro component is venture capital, right? I've invested. So I went on my own about 24 years ago, and have been just investing in different businesses. So I'm industry agnostic. Started in real estate development, and then moved over to healthcare, direct to consumer. And then actually now back into real estate development, which has been fun.
So that's the entrepreneur part of it. Would you consider yourself, I'm an entrepreneurial opportunist? How's that?
I'd say serial entrepreneur or venture capital. But yeah, I mean, I take a lot of bets, and as you know, right, 90 of them fail, but the 10 that work usually pay for the 90 that lost plus some. And as long as that keeps happening, you've got some movement. But I think that the pretense is like, I had a very short but successful career on Wall Street. And I was very lucky to learn at a young age what I didn't want. And I was making a lot of money, and in my early 20s, living in Union Square, Chelsea, and I was making probably $400,000 or $500,000 a year, and the guy beside was making a couple million. And I had a BMW. He had a Bentley. That was basically the difference, right? Like, he had a nicer house, I had an apartment, different lives, but we were creating nothing. We were making money, and I saw myself. I was just this young dumb kid, and I had all these ideas. I was working for Fidelity Investments, this massive, big behemoth multinational. I was doing institutional equity trades, and I would come up with this idea and that idea. And I'm from Kentucky, and you'll probably notice I don't necessarily have a Kentucky accent. No. That's largely by design, because I mean, I'm sure not all of my ideas were good, but they couldn't have all been bad. And I actually told myself, it must be I'm just a dumb hick from Kentucky, and like I'm not articulating enough. So I actually kind of chameleoned and augmented my dialect effectively, right? To kind of be maybe more heard. And I still saw myself not being heard. And it's like these little, I really think that's where, if you're an entrepreneur or just, corporate America, and those, there's a role for corporate jobs and big business, but I really think you die. At least I saw myself dying a little bit. And if you're in that condition for so long, I can see how your light would just go out. Because if you're told no that many times, like, you just stop asking, right? And you just stop trying, and then you just kind of, lay in and just become, part of the machine. So I was very lucky to realize at a young age to go out on my own when it wasn't a risk, right? It was a risk, but like it wasn't a risk to.
So
myself.
When you say you were lucky to go out on your own, was there a fork in the road moment? You met somebody, you read a book, something happened in life that you went, okay, I got to get my head out of my ass and change things up because this doesn't work for me. Was there a catalyst for the change that you made back then?
So I'll back up a little and kind of give you how I started. So I small town kid, Bardstown, Kentucky, bourbon capital of the world, probably 25,000 people. And I always had this big fish in a small pond mentality. I lost my dad at a young age, at 7. So like I always talk about stability. As a kid, you can't really see stability or teach stability, but you can really see instability. So I saw that, and a lot of that was resource driven, right? My mom didn't work; she was a young mom, me and my younger brother. So I think that probably, you know, ripple effect after my dad dying. It's the after the matter that you see what kind of effects to have. So that probably, tracing back to hundreds of $1,000s of a therapist on our couch, is probably the piece that was the driving force in wanting to make money, and like that money piece was like so important to me. And then like Wall Street, New York. So I had a $30,000 inheritance, and I grew that from 17 to 19 to about 2 million bucks. Now this is in the dot-com era,
Yeah.
and
That's a lot of money back then. A lot. Oh, I mean, it's a lot of money today, but it was a ton of dough back then.
yeah, we'll give that to a 19-year-old testosterone-filled kid who you already can't tell anything, and then I'm setting in. This will date me. You kind of get an idea. I don't know how many people listen versus view, but this will date me. I was day trading on Ameritrade on that Palm Pilot in class.
Yeah,
If you remember that screen Palm Pilot with wireless
sure.
and all that. So, I mean, that was like the wave of the future. And I was in class, like, you couldn't tell me a teacher's making 50 grand a year. I can make that in 2 days trading. So, like, couldn't be told anything, self taught. And as things go, if anyone remembers the late 90s, early 2000s, the bubble burst in the dot coms, I was leveraged. So I had 2 million, but you can leverage on margin. So I had probably
Yeah.
3.5 million worth of stock. So that's great going up. And I had no, stop losses. I wasn't, I was completely naked. So I wasn't hedged at all. And I lost that 2 million bucks in 4 days. So I told you that story to kind of tell you, like, to answer brown circle on your question. That was one of, other than losing my dad, one of the, in the moment, the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was a loser. I lost my inheritance. I'm a failure. Like, it just like bad mental space for about a week.
How old
And
were you back then, Jeremy? Sorry to interrupt. How, just to give me a timeline of age, you're in that early 20s back then?
20. This is
20.
2000. Yeah. And mind you, I lost all that cash, but I had bought a condo or a townhouse. I had bought a Jeep Grand Cherokee. So like I had 30-year-old, 35-year-old bills with the kid that
Yeah,
was still full time in college.
yeah.
So um, I had a decision. That was the fork in the road. It was like, you can pack it in, feel sorry for yourself, and go live back with your mom in Kentucky, or figure it out. And I did odd job to odd job to odd job, because around classes, you're not getting a full time job working school. And just a bit of circumstance in one of those jobs, I met my future boss, who was relocated at Fidelity, and we were just catching up on a conversation. And he was blown away by my market knowledge. Like, who are you? And I told him what happened, and he's like, "Well, it's pretty impressive that you grew it that much. It's stupid that you lost it all." I'm like, "Yeah, thanks. It still stung," but um, that ended up getting me to Wall Street. So I ended up, going there and doing that. So the while it was one of the worst things that happened to me, I think that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it taught me lessons that I live today. That nothing is going to go good forever, but also nothing bad is also going to happen forever. So if you can just have the resilience and just push through, um, life works out, right? I'm not special. Everyone's had loss, everyone's had struggle, and humans are pretty smart and intelligent beings and self protective. So we oftentimes block out all the bad, negative shit. And I'm not one that looks in the rear view. I don't think that's productive, but you can't be completely ignorant of your past. And if you can look at that historically, you can find a lot of strength in that. So for me, back to your question, I wasn't happy. I was like, do I have all these ideas? They're stupid. I'm not. I'm gonna go to my own. My mom was out of her fucking mind, because she's like, wait a minute, you just were like on death's door 2 years ago. Now you're making more money than me and your stepdad, and you just quit. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I did. But I told myself, what's the worst that can happen? There was not a scenario where I was going to go out and start Delk Enterprises 24 years ago, and I would lose $2 million in 4 days. That scenario did not exist. I made 6 grand my first year in business, so it wasn't super lucrative. My rent was 5,500, but um, I always knew that Worst case, I can go back to Wall Street. I can go and get that career.
Mm.
And that's why I think I was very fortunate, because some people can't, right? Some people, you've got the family, you got the mortgage, like you have other things that tie you down that you're more responsible for. So I was very fortunate to take that step. And then from there, every year it's just been a learning piece. And I think that curiosity is what drives me being the entrepreneur, because I just love business. I love learning. So for me, it's not work. It's new things and new experiences that you kind of get to learn, and you get better. Like I'm an overnight success. 25 years in the making, right? I'm not
Mm.
fucking smart. I'm not. I've been through a lot of battles, right? And a lot of wars. That's given me just experience to kind of see some of these movies already happening, and then you kind of go through. So that's the difference of just that experience. And I think that's why I love doing the coaching, whether it's on business growth or just personal growth and how to spend more time with their family and take more money home. All those things are so much fun for me, because sadly I have to charge, because like I've got an expensive wife and kids, so I have to justify my time. But I love doing it because, like, if I can save someone the trauma and the headache of some of the things that I've had to go through, and you can just look at my playbook and like, man, I did this, I zigged, I should have zagged. Take that lesson and save yourself the agony.
Well, it's interesting, as a coach yourself and as somebody who wants to support. And I mean, certainly I'm been that and am that often myself. What you just said is interesting. It's like if I can save somebody going through the heartache, the pain, the discomfort, all the things that go on, then that would be, really great. That's what I love to do. You
Hmm.
get to be a contribution, you get to make a difference. But there's another side to that that I, often contemplate and reflect on, which is, and this was an insight that was shared by me or with me by a guest that I had when I asked him. He's very wealthy, and I had asked him one day. I go, "So why are you doing all this, on our podcast?" I go, "Is it, is this just for your kids, for their legacy?" And he looked at me, and he was in studio, and he looked at me, he goes, and he was actually taken aback a little bit. Like you saw the body language, you're like, what? And he said to me, he goes, "Why would I do that to my children?" And I go, "What do you mean?" And he says, and he had his story was he was raised by a pastor. It was mom was a stay at home mom. I think 3 or 4 kids. So you can imagine what that upbringing was. Pretty meager. It was pretty thin,
Yeah,
But they broke bread every night together. They stuck together as a family. They did all the things, and he went on to build a very successful business practice and real estate and all the things that he went on to do. He goes, and then he finished that sentence with, he goes, "I am who I am because of what I went through to get here. And I would never take that away from my children. I'll send them to school, I'll feed them, I'll clothe them. But when it comes to dollars and cents, you are on your own. Go
yeah.
out and figure shit out." And I went, that's a pretty profound thought process. And I'm not suggesting that you're doing this for the kids. That's not what I'm suggesting at all.
Mhm.
It was more along the lines of, we don't want people, we were built to say, don't make the same fucking mistakes I made.
Yeah.
But there's a part of it where, we are who we are because of that. That's would be my only comment around that. And it's just, I'm reflecting on it. It's not as
Yeah.
hard and fast,
Well,
figure shit out.
no, it is, and I think that's the challenge, and you have to get to grips with it
Yeah.
quite early. Because I think, do you have children, Patrick?
I've got a daughter, I got 2 grandchildren.
Okay, so
And
I've got
yeah, I get it.
I have three. I've got a 11, 6, and 1 year old, two boys and a girl, and my son's the oldest, and um, I I struggled a lot because, like, he was like, it's clandestine. Like, he's going to carry on the name, and he's going to be Delk Enterprises and take it over, and like, you want to push this. It's just natural. Like, oh, especially your firstborn, it's just such a fucking tough thing.
Sure.
But firstborn boys, and he's going to take over Delk, and he actually does love real estate, and we watch shows. Like, he loves similar things, and that I do, but dude, he's not me, and he's not anywhere near me, and I'm happy about that, because I was fucked. I was messed up for a very, very long time. Probably still am. We all are, to a degree.
Yeah.
And um, I cherish the fact that I'm gonna and my kids are growing up so different than I did positively, like in the new experiences and better school, like all the things. But that's my biggest, not fear, but like the thing I'm probably most cognizant of is like, how do you not mess this up, right? How do you not mess up these kids? And I, I don't know the answer, so I'm sorry for all your listeners if you're thinking I got it. But I think that the only practice I've tried to preach and practice is no matter what you do, effort or no effort, they're going to be who they're going to be. And
Yeah.
your job as a parent is just to make sure they've got confidence, you support them, and let them be happy. I think that's the biggest the biggest takeaway. Where the full circle came for me. Do you know Bill Perkins? Have you heard of him? He wrote a
Oh yeah.
book. So Bill wrote Die with Zero. I met him down in in Branson's place. I have a couple properties in the BVI. He's got one in St. Thomas. So um, I've talked to him several times on this and read his book. And this wasn't in his book, but I kind of told him like I was so proud of like we were. It was I think maybe my 40th birthday. We were on this big yacht down in Miami, going to the Keys, and we're on FaceTime or something. And I was like, man, Bill, I've got it figured out. I've got this very complex trust and estate planning vehicles, and like it's incentivized. So like if my son makes any of my kids, not just my son, but if you make 100 grand, the trust will give you another 100 grand. If you put 200,000 for your house, I'll match it. Like all these things. And he's like, that's awesome, man. That's the fucking dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But everyone else does the same thing. And I'm
Yeah.
like, so deflated. I'm like, great, 40 grand worth of documents. And like, you called me an idiot, but I respect you. So I'm going to take it and ask why I'm an idiot. And it was the most profound thing. He's like, you're setting up your kids and motivating them for something that you would have ran through like a wall and killed. But what if they're not you? Like, what if your son or your daughter wants to be a poet and live in fucking Soho, right? And or be a starving artist. Like, why would you set up a situation that is, you know, not aligned with what their true happiness is? And that was when I ripped up those documents and changed them and kind of, gone through and that his approach with Die with Zero is like, give them money now, not when you die. Well, you can teach them and kind of mentor them, all those things. So
Yeah.
anyway, I got off topic
Well,
there,
no,
but
I think these are great conversations to have. To see those points of view. At this point in my life, with a couple of grandchildren, 7 and 8 years old, it's like I'm reflecting on certain things, and I've had many conversations, and it's easy for us to I know that as a boomer, there was a phase in my life where, it was like, when I have kids, I'm not going to raise them the way I was raised. That was a kind of a common thing. And so then I remember sitting around a table one night having drinks with friends, and there's a number of us, and somebody said, we all kind of had our turn at, I was brought up this way. When I have kids, I'm not going to do this, and we're not going to do that. And then I sat back in that conversation, literally in the moment, and I went, you guys, here we are, all bitching about the way we were raised. And, our dad did this, our mom did that, we didn't have this, we didn't have that, blah, blah, blah. I go, did you turn out all that bad? Like, are you a serial killer and you're not disclosing it? Like, is life shit for you right now? What's going on?
right,
And it was like, in that moment, it was like, no, what we went through is actually what developed our thought processes and how we are. It's up to us to wake up in the morning and say, are we being the best version of ourselves? And I know we're talking about kids a little bit, but I've just adopted the philosophy
mhm,
that ultimately, as a parent, my job, and I didn't necessarily do a good job of it because my daughter's now 40, and and she's awesome, by the way. She's an all-star. But I look at it and I go, at the end of the day, what's our job as parents? Keep our kids safe, keep them healthy, love them to death, put boundaries around them so they don't hurt themselves, but they have room to
fall,
get to know themselves, to
yeah,
learn about themselves, to
yeah,
make mistakes, and we're there for them. We're supporting them.
yeah,
And I have to say that with so many of my guests on this show, a lot of individuals that I talk to, like you, they, single parent for whatever reason, and then ultimately they had to gain the tenacity to actually survive, to go, I'm not doing that. I've got to pick up my game, or whatever the story is, the intellectual or the subconscious side of it. So I think as parents, I always say, when guys are going through stuff, we go, well, why have you got that pattern? Why are you doing this and doing that? It always comes back to our parents, always, by the
Always,
way.
yeah.
And guess what? You're going to fuck your kids up the same way your parents fucked you up. That's
Yeah,
just the way it is.
yeah, yeah.
That's the nature of the game.
Yes.
So that's how I look at it. But I do want to share one story with you just really quickly. I know a trust funder, and very wealthy. I mean, like crazy wealth. And he said to me, and this was all something I read as well, but he said that as a trust funder, when people know you're a trust funder, it doesn't matter what you do in terms of building a business, of doing something on your own by yourself. I take this, I build this business, I employ staff, I do all these things. You've got a tag on you that you're a trust funder.
Yeah.
And everybody has a story that says, yeah, well, of course he's making millions. He's a fucking trust funder, with absolutely no insight into what the deal was, how
Hmm.
that trust fund was laid out. But because they live a pretty good life, whatever the story might be, it wouldn't matter what they did. They've
Right.
got that tag on
You
them
get that
called trust.
label. Yeah.
You get that label, right? Anyways, we digress, but I think we solved some kids' problems right there.
Yeah.
We're doing a good job so far, Jeremy. So tell me a little bit about when you get into the venture capital. What in your definition, and I'm curious about it, uh, in your definition from venture capital versus angel investor, like how is that different in your world in terms of what you're doing? As a venture capitalist and or angel investor, what's the differentiation and how do you operate?
Great question. I do both. So like
Mhm.
in Lexington, we've got this a chapter called the Bluegrass Angels, right? So it's angel investors, and we've got a bunch of people that are retired in business, entrepreneurs, kind of going through, and they've got monthly meetings and like it's a little Shark Tanky, and we've thrown hundreds of thousands of dollars at it, but these are like super early stage, like
Mhm.
$10 million, $5 to $10 million, valuation ranges, but they're all small checks. And we get some good insight in going through, but the funds return, but it's more of like a giving back piece, and it's very passive and like, hey, it happens out. Sometimes we'll take a board seat, but it's just it's small incubated things, and it's just kind of more of a give back service. And then yeah, you get lucky, but we're not. Angel investing in Lexington, Kentucky is way different than angel investing in Silicon Valley, right? You're not very
Yeah,
rarely you're going to get a thousand Xer. Um,
yeah.
VC, what I do, and it's Delk Enterprises, and I call it strategic capital. So we will write checks, and we write checks all the time. But most of the time, it's still very early stage. We like to come in and really help. Um, so we'll usually buy 100% of the company and give back some equity to the founder, or 51%, and try and have some control, because every single time I've seen an investment deck, um, like it's about the number. I need this much money at this price. Some of these valuations, since like Shark Tank and all these other things, just fucking
Yeah,
bananas. Everyone's got $1 billion business, which is kind of
yeah.
asinine, but
And it makes for good TV.
it does great TV. But so what I tend to do is dig deeper, and actually it's a better win for everyone. So like Patrick, you're trying to raise $2 million at a $20 million pre. So you're offering me 10% of the business for $2 million, and then you got to use the proceeds. You're going to take that 2 million and do something with it. Hire a marketing director, CFO, legal. I mean, whatever the thing is.
Mhm.
I've got enough businesses and enough experience and a big enough team that as opposed to like beating people up where they feel bad about valuations, which I'm very good at, but it's not a pleasant. If you're gonna do business with someone, you don't want to beat the hell out of them, right? You don't want to
Yeah.
kind of go through. So what I often do is like, okay, here's your use of proceeds. I'll do that deal. but I'll just give you the result. So if I can get it done for, if it takes 2 million, that's great. But if I can get it done for less, it's beneficial to me because I'm getting a better rate on my valuation dollars. But it's also better for you because I'm going to write you a check for 2 million. Then you have to go and do it. I have the team that I can go through like with shared
Do it.
services and
Yeah.
do the marketing, do the legal, do all these pieces that amplify the business because it's not like, oh, let's try this out, let's hire this person to kind of go through and see. So it speeds up um, their roadmap a bit and gives
Yeah.
them more velocity with time, and I get a better deal, and they're happy because they got the result without getting the haircut on the valuation.
Are you in a VC kind of world? Do you live in a? Do you like to play in a specific industry? Is there a kind of a specialty that you have, or do you look at all
It's
kind of
that's
deals that make sense?
industry agnostic. I mean, now I'm at a point in my life like it has to be cool. I like it, and it's fun. Like the
Mhm.
coaching stuff has actually been a lot of fun for me because it's allowed me to get a lot of deal flow and not every. So I'm not. So don't sign up to me to get coached and think I'm going to buy or invest in your business. But it's a great way to start, right? Because I could help maybe go through, and then I've done some consulting for equity. I've done some things, but it's a great way for both people to date before you kind of get married. You know?
Yeah. So when you're that's an interesting model, and I think it's kind of cool. But when you're looking at a particular deal, I mean, numbers aside, and certainly you look at the viability of a certain project. Are you generally looking at new ideas, as in, there's certain way, like, okay, well, I've got a car wash, I want to do a car wash, and I've got this plan for this car wash, and it's like, 37 bays, and it's self-wanted, whatever the story is. I
Hmm.
mean, those are a lot of them out there, kind of thing.
Hmm.
uh, what, if you're looking at that, are you looking for something, or are you looking for something, hey, listen, I've got this car wash, it's totally new, and don't know if it's going to work, but it's got these special wands. I don't know what the story is, I'm just
Yeah,
making shit
but
up.
yeah, more geared the special wand route. I'm not
Okay.
going to help you. Like, I mean, I do real estate, I do things, but like, if you got a business that you've doing X amount and you want to grow by 10%, not your guy, right? I'm like very much the 0 to 1 type of guy, and even in my practice, like, out out here, I've got we just bought another company, and I bought the company for management, right? Because like I know for a fact out of history, I'll fucking break it, right? I'll get bored and try to mess with it. So like I can take forever to sin, but once it gets to $10 or $20 million in revenue, I usually stay on the board and step away and then put adults in to manage because like that's scaling. Not to say that's not there's a skill set to do it, but it's much easier to just operator, right? It's way harder to build a new market in a new space, but that's
Yeah.
the fun. I love that part of it. So
Mhm.
I gear towards now. The problem with that, and that's why it's venture. More of these garage or to use your analogy, these car washes with magic wands. Most of those fucking don't work, right?
Mhm.
But when they do, they
Yeah.
pay for the other 10 regular car washes that didn't work.
Okay, so that's how you view a little bit of it
Yeah.
now. So, I mean, you're getting deals pitched to you, just, from a listener point of view, going, oh gosh, like, I would like to, I need to raise some capital for a project. So, not that they would reach out to you. It's more, the question is, what are some of the things that you look for? I mean, the math is the math. The business plan is the business plan. But how much are you paying attention to who the person is on the other side of it? Now, you're suggesting that, your preference would be, I'll buy you, I'll give you some equity later, or however you want to structure it. But ultimately, you're taking it over. So you're not at the effect of maybe a potential business partner that doesn't align, or maybe doesn't have the skills. How much of that part of it plays into your decision making, so that if somebody's listening to this and pitching a deal, what would you, if you got one, two, three, five things that, listen, here's what you need to pay attention to, and here's how I want to hear it.
Yeah. Love this question. Um, so all your listeners that call me, do these things and you'll get much further. So I said I'm in Lexington, Kentucky. So we got some racehorses here. So you've heard the whole analogy of you bet on horses or jockeys. We're all jockeys, baby.
Ah.
And so I would say 95% of it is the founder. Um,
Mm.
and I when I buy a business, like very rarely would I buy it just to take it over. I would buy it, but give them founders still a massive amount of equity to kind of
Yeah.
go through and structure because like they're the operator, the visionary. But it's all the person. Ideas are cheap, right? I got
Dime
all
a
kinds of
dozen.
ideas, but they're
Yeah.
cheap as chips. Um, so that's number one. So it's all on them. The biggest tip I can tell you, and well, and then the second rule for me is, I it's not a requisite, but I like to invest in a founder that's been through a cycle, right?
Mm,
Whether they've lost the business, they went bankrupt, or they've had struggle. They like, you know, the shiny bright kid that's out there, like you don't have enough, you know, scars and scar tissue to kind of to go through it. So I really do favor people that have went through a cycle. But the biggest piece is, um, being honest. I think the biggest mistake that I see are these founders that come in and have it all figured out. They have every answer.
mm,
You and I know. I've been doing this for 25. I don't fucking have it all figured out myself, and I've arguably more experience than a lot of the people who are pitching me. But I know, I'm honest with myself. I don't know what this is or that is. And when they start going through and saying, "Oh, I got this answer. I got that answer," not only is it's either they're lying and they're disingenuine, right? And they're just kind of going through, or they don't know enough to kind of answer, and they don't know what they don't know. Either way, I'm not investing them. But
mm,
the now back that up. Like, well, why would I be vulnerable? Because if you're vulnerable and being honest, um, that's a huge thing. Because like now you're telling me like, hey, like say Patrick, you're pitching me a business. Like, Jeremy, I'm the best salesman ever. I can't balance my checkbook to save my life. Like, most people trying to raise money would look at that like, I'm going to ask this guy for money. I'm never going to tell him I'm not good with money. Please tell
mhm.
me you're not good with money, because like if you're
Yeah.
not, like I can help you, because like that's the thing. And then that's where you can kind of see synergies and like, okay, dude, I can't sell your garage magic wands, but I can run books and my team can run books and I can help you with KPIs. I can do stuff. So all of a sudden, I now trust this guy or girl a lot more because they were willing to be honest. More than that, so I know they've got integrity. More than that, we've cut through 6 months of emotional bullshit of like me trying to protect it, whatever. And it's like, dude, you suck at finance? Cool. Let's fucking like nail that for you so you don't have to worry about it and you go and just do those pieces. So being vulnerable and just being honest, like, hey, I don't have this figured out. Now, you can't go to an investor meeting and not have any answers, but
Yeah.
knowing what your zone of genius is and then saying that's what I do really, really well, and having the courage to say what you don't do well and what you really need beyond money, that's
Mhm,
where guys like me, and everyone else in the space get excited because, like, wow, there you go. Now I know what you need. We're being
mhm,
honest because we have to
mhm.
be.
So, it's an interesting point that you make, and I sit on where I'm a chair in a CEO peer to peer program, which is it's not a coaching program. I'm a chair. I facilitate conversations between a small group of CEOs that are sitting down to in non competing businesses that sit down, get together half a dozen times a year, bring a problem to the group, and then tap into the collective intelligence of that group with the challenge I got, the issue I got, all of the things that happen at that level. But there's a fundamental breakdown, which is the question is that even as a CEO, there's a lot of expectations of you as a CEO, but as well, CEOs have a tendency to put a lot of expectations on themselves. I think the kind of the wise, if it's experienced, is for a CEO to go, I'm the CEO, but I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm not good at. And then I need to make sure that I'm surrounding myself and filling the gap of what I'm not good at, not interested in, don't get lit up about, whatever the story is. And when what I'm hearing you is that you're okay with that side of, as a matter of fact, you want to hear that side of the equation. That's really what I'm hearing. So that you come in as the VC and say, okay, I got team. Here's what I got to fill. Okay, let him drive this pointy end of the spear over here, and I'll fill in behind to do what we need to do in terms of execution of the plan. Is that a
That's
relatively
100%. Yeah, and like, not to say I won't invest in someone that
yeah?
isn't vulnerable and isn't saying, comes in with hasn't been through a cycle and doesn't know what they don't know. Not say I'm sure I have invested in that in the past, but nowadays it's 99% of the deals are as the former, what I just kind of said to you. The other piece too, from a mistake standpoint, like after funding, what have you, that you kind of touched on with the CEO role, is there's so many of these solopreneurs, and everyone has said this. Like, I'll just do it myself, Pat. Like, you can't. It's going to take me more work to show you how to do it than doing it. That's a
Yeah.
great way to make thousands of dollars. If you want to be a thousandaire, like you
You're gonna
can't
be a
say,
thousandaire.
yeah, you want to be a thousandaire. That's a great model. But like, make a hire before you think you need to make a hire, right? That's like the biggest thing. But then this is where like giving you some fuel to like, what do I need? Lay out what the fuck you like to do and what you don't like to do. And then in that don't like to do, there's probably going to be a don't like to do and not good at. Well, those are the things that first to go, right? Why
Yeah.
why do something you don't like, and then more on top of that, you suck at it, dude. Next, free yourself up and go do more.
Yeah, put your time in what you're good at. I mean, we often, I think, are raised in, there's that common phrase, work on your weaknesses. And not everybody has turned that around, but the real turnaround is no, don't work on your weaknesses, work on your strengths, make your strengths stronger, kick your weaknesses to the curb and get them handled by somebody who actually has that strength. A friend of mine owns a very successful business, but he went through this phase where, he just like, this. It's like you go for dinner, the server comes and goes, do you want to, would you like a copy of your receipt? And I go, no, but my bookkeeper insists that I give her one, right? But here's the thing about it. I hate the minutia. Like, I cannot, it is, I don't like it. It bores me. It is just, accounting, the word is like a hypnotic word that puts me to sleep when I hear it, so I have to be very cautious about it. Yet my friend discovered, he goes, I've got this. I hired an assistant, a bookkeeper assistant, and I just take all the receipts out of my pocket in a big clump and I put them on the desk and I go, Nancy, here you go. And she goes, oh, I love receipts. Thank you. It's like, he goes, she genuinely loves doing this shit. And I just cannot be happier. So, anyways, it's just probably a bad example of what we have to get in touch with as owners. Like, it's not the best use of our time.
No,
Work on your strengths. Like,
but
use those.
I think it's a great example, because there are people like you couldn't fathom like being bothered with it, but there are people that just really geek out, like, oh my gosh, wow, it gives me so much satisfaction to just take all of this and just put it in
I know.
Excel, categorize and like and alphabetize. Like, they just, and it's like, great, glad you're happy.
It's so funny. I've listened to my bookkeepers, talk to each other, and they're going, "Oh, so I didn't balance it. Like, I was 15 cents out. Drove me crazy. It's like it took me 3 hours to find it, but I found it." And I'm, as the owner, going, "Okay, that's what they have erasers for." Like, why, what the hell? I
Right,
just paid you for 3 hours to balance 15 cents. I never say anything because I know that's just how they're wired, and
right.
there's all sorts of balances to that. But it is funny to hear those conversations because it's the furthest thing from my mind that I would spend any time doing. I would use the eraser. So, anyways, that's how I look at that. So, I want to go back to part of your bio. You share in your bio story of that you lost or walked away from like $500 million or whatever the number was. It was a big number. Give me a little bit of insight into that.
600.
Six
Um,
hundred. Oh yeah, let's be clear. It was 600 million.
so talked about that cocky kid who couldn't be told anything at 19. Well, 20 years later, this is 2019. We were in healthcare, and I've had several healthcare businesses, and this was a pharmacy build business. And we brought, I don't know how much you're into health and wellness, but we like bioidentical hormones, hormone optimization, like this anti-aging type of approach, and then big into peptides. Like peptides, we kind of brought peptides to the U.S. So I took that business from zero to about 60 million in rev, with about 20 drop into the bottom line. I mean, Inc. 500, it
Wow.
was the fourth fastest growing healthcare company in 2019, Inc. 500, and then the 21st in the US. So it was a rocket ship. And we were probably making about a million a month, somewhere around there. Like, so it's pretty good money. I've got a few billionaire friends.
Yeah.
Um, their net worth was more than me, but we weren't living any different. So we got
Mm.
this call, and we got them all the time. But there was this group, a cold LinkedIn message, like, "You're interested?" I'm like, "Yeah, maybe," but like, we're, it would just take a stupid number. Like, you got to, like, well, we just paid 200 million for this other pharmacy who I knew, and we were murdering them, and we were the biggest guys in this space, and just as a rocket ship to the moon. And um, I was like, yeah, well, I'll talk to you. We're in Vegas at a conference. I'm willing to go. And they came through, and um, you know, threw out some numbers, and like, where they wanted to grow their business to like 100 million EBIT, and that's why they're trying to roll up. I'm like, well, I'll be half of that next year, right? So I'm on this rocket ship, whatever. So like, all right, well, we're super interested. Do you have a number? I'm like, a lot. And they came, and they're like, oh, 300, 400. I'm like, I don't know. And like, that was a big number then. I'm like, I don't know, maybe we'll see. So like, all right, well, let's continue the conversation. They came out to Kentucky, tons of diligence, and got to a term sheet. And like, before the term sheet, I was down. I remember I was in Miami. This is the book, the long version of the story. And they're like, all right, well, it's a little different than we thought, and want to run this by you. And I was expecting like, oh, they're going to retrade on me, because I said 300, 400, and they came back with 600. And um, I think we were probably going to take it. And then they wanted to go through and like make more of an earn out. They were just kind of being a little bit funny with it. And I was making so much money. And, you know, that's part one. But part two was, um, I do have one more company that's hopefully will get me there, but this $1 billion exit, or $1 billion valuation is rare air, right? So I
Mhm.
basically had a dialogue with myself, like, man, you're the small town kid from Kentucky. You have an opportunity to, have $1 billion exit, and if they're going to pay you 600 million now, they'll pay you $1 billion in a year. So, um,
Uh-oh.
and so I killed it. And I put, and so like everything in the book too, like, if audio version, obviously you're listening, but if you look at the actual book, like I put like, here's a copy of the email. So like, some of these things, like, here's like footage, like you can kind of validate these
Yeah,
things. Um, 2 weeks later, our pharmacy was raided by the feds, by the FDA, and I ended up paying $2 million in fines. Um, and selling the business to some buddies for about 6 million. So about 1% of what I what I was going to do.
uh,
I had bigger offers,
yeah,
um, but they would have basically just bought. And this is right during the COVID. This is like March of 2020.
yeah,
So I like offers for 12, 15 million, but they were going to just buy the book of business, and then
yeah.
I would have put 110 people in the town that I live in out of a job. So
That's not
the
good work.
$6 million, it was going to be too expensive for me to take 6 million not to be able to sleep at night, and see
Yeah,
someone at the grocery or whatever. So and that worked out. They just, the company is still thriving, hundreds of employees. They just did a $15 million addition, so like, it works out, and it's good to see. And I think that's the part of business is nice, that seeing these things are all your baby. Sometimes your baby's ugly, but seeing them
mhm,
survive you and building real businesses and kind of going through, whether you got earnouts or just, it's a good thing to kind of see. It's nice. But yeah,
mhm.
I
So
would
when
do
you
it
look
again.
at,
The other question you asked, would you do it again? And the answer is yes. I would have,
yeah,
because if the company we've got now, called True Diagnostic, we're looking at biological age and epigenetics. I mean, that company, at the time of the raid and this whole thing happened with the FDA, I had $1 million in equipment for this new company, True, that had been in the warehouse for 6 months, and it was just sitting there. So,
mm,
um, I can go down just like the path of losing $2 million and complain and say, "Oh, woe is me," and this is like, "Oh, I'm such a victim."
yeah,
I could say, "Oh, I'm the victim for not taking the 600 million," or that happened for me, and now gave me the catalyst, like, to go and buy another building during COVID and launch a new company. And that company is my second Inc. 500 company. I think we were
nice.
um, 50th or something last year, in the Inc. 500. So everything works out for a reason. It's, you got to keep moving forward and changing your perspective on failure, because like, failure, I do not believe that anything good happens to you or anything bad happens to you. I think life's a series of events, and it's the actions and the emotion that you apply to those events that will later determine if they were a good thing or a bad thing.
It's interesting that kind of philosophy that you mentioned, because a really wealthy friend of mine, I was on his boat one year and kicking around, and I asked him the question. I said to him, I said, here you are, you've made your first million at 20 some years old, and now you're making millions daily. What's like, how do you do that? What's the secret to all that? And he said to me, he goes, and I'm just me and him, and he looked at me, he goes, I don't make mistakes. And I kind of paused and I go, I don't, it was like in my brain, I went, wow, that's really arrogant. And so I didn't say anything. That was what I was thinking. But there was this pause. And then he said, I just get a result, and I either like it or I don't. And if I don't like it, I put in the correction, or I kick the whole idea to the curb and redo it. Because everybody looks at this and looks at what they do, and they made a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. You just did your shit. You didn't get the result you wanted. It's not a mistake. And like, he doesn't even think in terms of mistakes. He only thinks in terms of, I got a result. I either like the result or I didn't like the result. I either kick it to the curb or I put in the correction and keep moving on. And so he was at that point, 70 years old. So, a lot of years in the saddle, and he'd always been wired, or he'd got himself wired way early in his career. I don't make mistakes. And I went, wow, it was kind of a profound thought process. I
Yeah.
haven't evolved to be that way, by the way. But I went, oh, sometimes I kick back to that you know,
Yeah.
when I go off the rails.
No,
So
it's
I,
it's, it's so smart. I mean, I see so many entrepreneurs that, either want to have an idea, want to start something, and this never do, or like, hey, I've been doing this long, and like, do I buy the company? Do I make the product line extension, or whatever it is, like, to make that step? And
mm,
the title of my book is called Without a Plan, and the subtitle is a memoir of unbound action and failing my way to success. And
mm,
I've learned nothing from the successes, everything from the failures, and
yeah,
action and forward momentum will be your savior forever. And maybe you're not as crazy, and I'm wired this way. I perform better if, like, it's cards are stacked against me and my back's against the wall. So I find
mm,
myself sometimes putting myself in fucking situations I cause. I'm like, why are you making this harder on yourself? But it's because, like, I'll work better. I don't. It's yeah.
yeah.
That's for
It's a
another therapy
pattern.
day. But
Yeah.
but you don't have to go and quit your job and go all in if you're not wired like me. But do something. Take one step. Right. Start the website. Make a hire. Ask her to marry you. Just take one step, and I guarantee you, only one of two things are going to happen. That's it. There's only two possible scenarios. Scenario one is you're going to do it, whatever that step is, and it works. Great. Works. Then that's going to give you confidence to take another step, another step.
Yeah.
The other scenario was even better. It doesn't work, right? That's your hope. It doesn't work because so much your mistake thing. That's going to give you that confidence, like, oh well, that didn't work, but I'm fucking not dead. The world's the sun's still up. Like, it's, oh my god. So there, and what do you have? What are you left with when it didn't work? More information. Now you know more. Like, okay, that didn't work. So to your buddy's point on the boat, let's go, and now with new information, try and do it again, and then that works. So see how I mean? Like, it's those, when you can boil it down
Yeah.
to what happens, and then the last piece is just from a mindset component. um, Everyone asks themselves the wrong questions. Like, what if I do this? And you've been doing podcasts for 8 years. What if I do this podcast and everyone? I'm sure you're like, well, maybe no one listens. No one likes it or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, what if it does work? Right? We always live into the negative, right? What if it does? What if it does go and it does catch fire, and I've got hundreds of thousands of views every month and downloads and 8 years going, and I meet all these really cool people? What's that done for your life? And now, when you said in the green room, like, this has become a bit of your um, identity of who
Brand.
you are.
Yeah.
8 years ago, you were not
Yeah.
a podcast. You know what I mean? So I think that's a question to ask. What if it does? And you've heard this quote. I don't know where I heard it, but I've seen it a couple of times. Like, how big would you dream if you knew you could not fail? And I think
Yeah.
that's the most like profound thing. And
Yeah.
another way of hearing is like the definition of hell is meeting the person you could have become.
Yeah. There's an interesting, that there's so people use quotes all the time, and I go, listen, those quotes, when you look at a lot of these quotes, they're so valuable if you apply them. If you don't apply them, then there's just another quote that sounded good. I
It's a
use the
bumper
quote.
sticker or a T-shirt. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. I always use the quote. If more information was the answer, we'd all be billionaires with six packs, right? So it's like we don't need more information. We need a context, and we need to take an action and execute on an idea. I mean, there's so many great philosophically things that we need to kind of get into. And to your point, there's a quote that I often go back to that I use, in whether it's in myself or my coaching or whatever, and that is that the quality of our life is a reflection of the quality of the questions we ask ourselves. And to your point, people in general, I'm guilty of it, you're guilty of it, we don't ask ourselves the right question. We ask ourselves one question or two questions really high level. And, my guidance for myself, by the way, as well as others, is you're not asking yourself the right question. You need to dig until when you get to the right question, you know it, you feel it. It like often is the case. We just don't ask ourselves the right question. Like, what if I fail is not the fucking question to ask yourself. It's a wrong question. I like the other side of that. Well, what happens if it works? That's a different question, right? And so we don't ask ourselves great questions and force ourselves to think and engage our brain in a way that gets creative and supports whatever it is that we're doing. So I don't know where I'm going with that little rant, but I really appreciate the fact that, I agree 100%. We don't ask ourselves great questions.
Yeah, well, just to add to it, because I agree completely. I have a rule, and people should just do this and save yourself the 10 grand a month as a client. But like, um, is why the fuck are you doing this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if your answer is for a fucking car to stand in front of on Instagram, or
Yeah.
like if that's your
I'm
answer,
running.
like
Yeah.
you're so gone. And but the reality is like that's okay. Like, but I usually try and go 3 or 4 layers in. Okay, but why? And I'm trying to find out their why, and I just ask why. Well, I don't know. I never grew up with a car. Okay, well let's talk. Let's dig in there, and you peel back that onion, and because and I ask these questions because this is from the guy that, for a period of my life, I was buying all the cars and watches and houses and all that shit because I was miserable and I wasn't happy. I was trying to go through it. I still have all those things, but the why I have them are different, right? I did a video the other day, like making fun of Ty Lopez, like the whole here in my garage thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, here's my Ferrari, and then there's another car, but it was like it was cringy. It was hard to do, and
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
don't know Ty Lopez, like it doesn't kind of resonate. Like, wow, this guy's a douchebag. But I was making fun of it, and the idea, like, yeah, I bought this Ferrari when I was miserable and happy. It was my first supercar, and I'll never get rid of it. Like my 11-year-old son loves cars, but this 67 Shelby fastback that we have, like that looks like Gone in 60 Seconds, Nick Cage. My son and I found that as a California car, found it in a barn in Ohio, and did a 3-year rotisserie restoration on it. That car is consistent with my why. It's
Mm.
Sunday drives. He has hair, I don't, so I can't really say when to my hair. But that's consistent with your why. That like, okay, yeah, it's a cool car, it's expensive, and like whatever the bullshit, but like it's stopping to get ice cream, having a conversation on a Sunday, listening to music with the windows down. Like that's okay. So I don't want to shame wealth and shame success because I think some people do that. Resources are great, but it can't be your only reason why. You got to figure out that why. And when you do that and you're consistent with that, you're really fucking hard to stop, man. You are
Yeah.
really hard to stop because you're playing at a different game. Like you're now like it's now about impact and kind of going through and like even from a sales perspective, like you need to be so obsessed with your product that like if you don't buy my product, Pat, I'm calling you Pat. I think it was Patrick, but if you don't buy my product, I'm gonna hurt because you need it. Like I feel like Dan Kennedy was like the best at this. Like he literally kind of said like, if you don't buy it, I don't want you to buy it. I have to, because if you don't get this, you're going to be worse off. And if
Yeah.
you're that passionate and emphatic about your product, it's fucking hard to mess with you, man. It really is, because you believe, and you are. You're helping people. You're making that impact. So
Yeah.
if you can do that, but you can't do it if your motivation is what you're putting the key in to go home.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It's interesting that you brought that up. A good friend of mine was selling uh, I don't know, dog food, but it was whatever, organic, healthy, blah blah blah. And he was the top sales guy in the country by far. Like nobody was even close to him. So I'm having my conversation with Lambert, and I go, dude, like, how do you do that? And he looks at me, and goes, well, because they need this. And he's selling direct to veterinarians and that kind of stuff. And I go, well, what do you mean? He goes, because they need this shit. Like it drives me crazy that they don't understand. And I realized in that moment, that's exactly what you described. And most sales guys don't have that passion. They don't have that fundamental belief.
The
Like
belief, the belief. Yeah.
you don't want it. Like, okay, hold on just a
You,
second.
you
Maybe
must
you
not
didn't
understand.
hear me. You
Yeah.
don't understand what I'm
Clearly.
saying.
Yeah.
Let me say it a different way. Like, it's like
Yeah.
by the time they're done, it's like, yeah, I get it. Okay, right, you're right. I got to buy this.
Yeah.
So it is an interesting. So I want to go back a little bit on the VC side of it, and a little bit about you. So 8 years later, I've had some amazing guests on the show. But my observation is, and this is a little bit of self observation as well, what I've noticed a pattern in, and then this is maybe where, what is it that you're seeing in maybe some of the potential VC guys that are coming,
Mhm.
to pitch you deals. My observation is that if you're in that 20, 30, 50, $100 million plus range where you're driving a business into that kind of, I think I would probably put, let's say, 50 million plus on this tag, is that there is a level of intensity of individuals that, to me, because I've had lots of comparison, I'm going, that level of intensity, not in a negative way, by the way, necessarily, but they're intense. You're showing up not as intense as some of my guests, but I get in behind it that you're an intense guy. So am I full of shit, or what's your read on that about you and about your potential VC guys?
Yeah. Well, you've heard that whole adage, like, the first million's the hardest. It is. It solely is. Why? Why is it? Because we make it hard. Because in our mind, we have this dream, like it's just like this impossible leap, and then you get there, and then all of a sudden, like, oh, you made 1 million, and then now you make 10 million, or you make it, and it just, you get more confident, and it's more like you
Yeah,
expect it. It's not like this. Oh, I'm like, I won a lottery ticket. Like, yeah, well, I'll just go make it. You go through, and you just change. It's like, oh, well, I've done it, and it's just like anything else. Like, you tie your shoe, and you don't fucking give yourself a fist bump every time you tie your shoe. Like, you learned it, you've got that. It's now from, a consciously, an unconsciously competency, right? You now are, you kind of figured it out. So I think that's part, is one, is just like, the numbers just kind of get bigger.
yeah,
Um, and also the drive. I think from a guy that had salespeople, there's a lot of people say they want all the stuff, but they don't want to do it, right? You get paid, um, pursuant to the amount of pain you can take, and
yeah,
how big the problem is that you'll solve. Fucking period. End of story.
yeah,
That's guaranteed. And I've had salespeople in every job, not every job. We're opening up a really high end restaurant, so some things don't work in this thing, but most things I try to, you know, create comp plans that are infinite, uncapped. Like, during the pharmacy days, I was paying one guy 1.5 million a year. Well, guess what? That's a lot of money. Oh, why would you pay? I don't give a shit. If he's making me 1 million a month, why do I fucking
totally.
good go have fun? But
Go do
what
it.
what what I found, and this is in Kentucky, so I mean maybe it's different in other cities, but most people. So that kid was a rock star and just killed it. Most people at 250,000. That's, again, this is like for my demographic. So that, no, understand, Miami, New York, maybe different. Most people, by most, like 95% of people, get to the level of 250, and for them to go to 500, it ain't that much harder, but they don't need it because I've got the house. I have a country club membership. My kids are in private school. Like that's at Psyche. And no matter what, they have it's right there, but they don't go through and do it. Then you have people like me who are fucking psychotic and understand that there's always another level. So yeah, I've done a lot of therapy. I'm trying to not curse. I'm giving up on cursing, but not to yell. But I used to be, so like everything's a fire drill and yell. And like with age, you mature a bit, right? But um, I think what drives it for me, it starts in childhood, like this whole insecurity of not having money and all that stuff. That like I still have it. Like I'm more successful than many more majority of my friends. Um, but we're all successful in different lights. But I can see myself. My wife picks up on it. Like if I'm around someone that maybe is a billionaire, someone that's more wealthy than me, like I will say things like name like that make her cringe. And it's probably it's these small little comments of like me justifying like because I still don't even though you don't you have this imposter syndrome and I'm sure you've had it. I remember we were at our beach house. This was like last year, and it was a couples trip, and she's like, we have a lot of friends in the islands down there. It's like second family, and it's just a really cool experience we love sharing with people. And she's like, wow, like it must feel great to have really made it. I'm like, who the fuck are you talking to? Like, what? I don't feel like that at all. Like zero, there's zero part of me that feels like it, and that's why I think like it's the destination. It's not the destination; it's the journey, and that's
Mhm.
what involves me. And I think that's where you see. So yes, it's the intensity of being able to take the pressure in that, but for me it's still that curiosity, like in we all have goals and these little games that we play with ourselves, but um every goal I've hit, I've got there, and like once I get to this point I'm done. Then you get
Yeah.
there and you're like, ah, what's past this and what's past this. And we did Monaco last year for Formula One, and I was on my buddy's boat and like this sick epic thing. You want to get humbled really quick? You think you've done well? Go over there. You're shining shoes. So there's
Oh, there's
always
a
another level. You're never gonna that's okay, but stop comparing yourself to other people. But I do think, to answer your question directly, I think that is the crux of it. It's this that curiosity of wanting someone to go that next level, and that desire to keep moving, because the money does, once you get to that certain level, it does become more trivial, and it's more about the game and the legacy that you're leaving.
Well, I've shared this story many times to your point. So the when I was on that my friend's sailboat, it was a sailboat, like a $5 million sailboat. He had done the ARC race. He'd done like it was a really extravagant kind of boat at that time, $5 million. Anyways, I don't know where we were, St. Kitts or someplace. I don't remember. We were in the Caribbean somewhere, and I don't know which island we had been on. But anyways, I don't remember. But he said, "Hey, the King of Spain's boat is in port. Do you want to go see it?" Okay, I'm not a boat guy. I'm not a sailboat guy, and arguably what we were doing was not sailing. But at the end of the day, I said, "Hey, sure." So he throws a skiff overboard. We jump on and we go to this. I don't know. It was like a 270-foot sailboat or something. Like it was big, and we
Yeah,
went around it. And as we're going around it, he goes, and it's beautiful. It's all funky and all the things it's got. And he looked at it and he said, "So this king has got 7 versions of this." He goes, "How much fucking money do you have to have where you're going to have 7 sailboats like this kicking around?" And in that moment, I laughed. And he looks at me, he goes, What are you laughing about?" And I go, "I wake up on any given day and I go, Patrick, you're doing pretty good." And then I come and hang out with you and I go, "Fuck, I've accomplished nothing in my life."
yeah, yeah,
And then we go, "And you're comparing yourself to the King of Spain, for Christ's sakes."
yeah.
He goes, "Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No,
true."
yeah, and I mean, the moral of the story is, I mean, there's always another level,
There
and
always is another level,
yeah,
right? Who's the King of Spain comparing himself to? Probably some other
yeah,
king. Who knows? But
Sheikh Mo in Dubai or a
yeah,
Khalifa, yeah, these guys.
exactly. So when you look at what you've developed over the years, and um, you know, and you look at people that you coach, is there a kind of a, again, I go back to something you said earlier, and I'm paraphrasing and kind of taking it to what I heard it mean, which is, it's not about what you do; it's about who you got to become to do what you need to do. Right?
Hmm.
It's like it's yes, it is the journey, but on that journey, who are you being? Like, who do you need to become to achieve the result that you say you want to achieve?
Yeah.
And so I know from my, like, I've been in business 40 years. I've not built $100 million company, but we've done very, very well. I'm happy with it. And I can reflect on it and go, why didn't I build $100 million company? Well, whatever. It's just what it is. I've done very well. We're not complaining, and I love what I do. But my whole goal was to understand that for me, making a difference in other people's lives was kind of really what was my purpose, what was my drive. I discovered that, and but in behind all that, what got in my way in business that I can identify in myself was I had a strong need to be liked
Mm.
early on in my career.
Hmm.
Now I care less.
Hmm.
I really don't. But I still, want to be very clear on how I show up, who I am. My own narrative is, am I being the best version of myself? That's my own growth. But the being liked component of it,
Hmm.
I think, was a real, I don't want to call it a downfall, but it was not the best thing that I could have done.
Yeah.
When you look at your coaching clients, even yourself, how much of that played into what you do?
What I do in coaching.
Yeah, coaching, or even in yourself. Like, again, when I look at the guys that I've interviewed over the years, they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
Your opinion of me is none of my business. That was their general attitude. And but what was yours? Do you see that quality in yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I I talk about failure a lot and kind of going through it. And I think the whole idea about failure is that it's so self-inflicted that, like, because, oh, what if I do this and I fail? It's not like the reality is like nothing's gonna fucking happen. That's why I told you those two scenarios. Most of the time, where people get hung up on is what are people gonna think about me? And I always kind of like lead in and just like I will tell you, they don't give a fuck about you. No one cares about you. No one cares
Yeah,
about me. They don't care about your kids, your grandkids. They care about you, but my kids as well. But no one else cares. Everyone else, they care about themselves.
yeah,
So that's one. I think two, I curse, I do this, but so yeah, I'm like you. I don't care what people think about me because I know who I am, and I'm comfortable with that. So,
mhm,
life's too short to give a fuck about what people think. Be
yeah,
the best version of yourself. Be who you are and be happy. Be the best version of yourself. I completely agree with that. But if you aren't living your true authentic self, and you see these people that are in their one room they're like this, and the other room like that, would be the most miserable existence ever. Like, how do you keep up with all the personalities? Like, I'm just going to be myself, and then the people that you love you, and you love them, and then you know how it is with age, and your circles get smaller and smaller.
yeah,
So I think, yeah, I'm definitely in that world. Like, being, everyone wants to be liked now, and I will tell you this: there is that, and I told you, like, even with me, who's done very well and doesn't all those different things, there is still a bit of me that's little boy who doesn't feel like he's enough, which is
yeah.
not to people. I feel like I'm better, like not that I'm better, not to feel like
No,
I'm at this level or I'm here, but when I'm around the people that are like at a higher level, this King of Spain or these my buddy who's I was on this boat, it wasn't my boat, it was on his boat in Monaco. I do. There's at seven that I don't belong, and I'm in insecurity, and that's from a guy to like all like you saved me the embarrassment of reading my bio, but like your bios are bullshit and your CVs are all bullshit. Like those are the accolades that you put in your
yeah,
CV and what you did, but that's not what you really did to get there. And that's what I talk about in the book is all the shit that I did to go through and get there. On the coaching piece, like I will make you more money. I will give you efficiencies on how to work, on your business, not in your business, and like more time with your kids. I can do all those things. Those things are fucking simple. It's not what I like the best in coaching. Like what I like the best in coaching is like the other stuff. Like I've got the money, but like I was cheating on my wife, or I'm
mhm,
just stops like all of that stuff. I get way more like I think someone gave my book a review. It was like a mix between Wolf of Wall Street and The Hangover, right? Because there's some really good stories in there. But it's all like really good, all applicable business stuff. But I share a lot of my personal life in there as well because I think business is so personal. But
Yeah.
that's some of the best feedback I've gotten from like single stay-at-home mothers or wanting to start a business, like that vulnerability and
Yeah.
teaching people that it's okay and like loving yourself and understanding your why, like that I get way more impact and more value out of because it's fun and having seen those people make those breakthroughs because if you do coaching, you're not really doing shit, like you're helping them get out of their own way majority of the time, like that's your job.
Majority of the time, yeah.
And letting them know, and that's why I put all this stuff out in the book, like dude, like you had it bad, and not say I've had it worse, like, but people have had it worse than me and better than you, but dude, we've all, that's the common element, we're all there. And if you can survive this, which everyone that's listening has, so they know what their catastrophic thing was in their life, and they're still here, they're still listening to your podcast, so use that and harness that as fuel to take another step.
Yeah. Jeremy, you've been very generous with your time, but I realize that we're you've got a bit of a deadline, and that's fine. So I just want to start to wind down a little bit, and going to do that with a few rapid fire that aren't so rapid fire questions. You ready?
Sure.
I just warmed you up. The first couple are easy. Apple or Android?
Apple. I've got a business partner in this restaurant deal that's Android, and I don't know if I belittle or beat her
You
like
may
daily. Like green text, I just completely, yeah. Big act.
Listen, I had a couple. I was Android for several years up until about 5 or 6 years ago, and I had a buddy of mine. He goes, "Dude, I don't know if I can be your friend anymore if you keep using Android. You're too hard to communicate with.
Yeah,
You've got to get into Apple." Anyways,
yeah.
that was that. Do you have a favorite music genre? Do you have a favorite song? Favorite band? Are you a music guy?
Love music. I think my wife doesn't agree with me, shocker, but I think I've got like the best playlist ever. I mean, I'm Jay-Z to rap to Kenny Chesney, big country music to Sinatra. I mean, so like very diverse music, but I can't sing, draw. I mean, I think I got one dance move. So I have
Yeah.
such an appreciation for people in the arts, right? That like going to see a play, like I just think that's like way, I can't even do anything. So I love music. Yeah.
Yeah, I always say, like somebody's asked me, "Do you play an instrument?" And I go, "Dude, I can't play the radio. I got no talent when it comes to
Yeah.
that at all." Uh, Favorite movie?
Favorite movie. That's a tough one. Godfather. Godfather is probably up there.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah.
That's an old one.
Yeah.
I don't think I've had anybody mention that one on the show. Ah, good one.
Yeah.
Your room, your desk, or your car? What do you clean first or have cleaned first? What's important to you?
I'm a car guy, so
Yeah,
car. Yeah.
you like them. You like them polished up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, great. Favorite swear word?
Fuck. Cunt and fuck. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I did a lot of, you notice the chameleon component, right? Like I told you that I did that in New York. I've done a
yeah,
ton of business in Australia and some of my dearest friends in Australia.
yeah,
Like the CUNT word is like and or in there, and I
yeah.
just picked it up and ran with it. So
Totally.
like in Australia, it's like fluid, it's no big deal, but outside of here, sometimes it kicks people.
I have a young female friend, very attractive, and she drops that all the time when
It's,
she gets
it's a
pissed
great
off.
word. It's a great word.
It's a good word, and of course in the UK, it's like that's just
Well,
totally
they
normal.
describe it as like it's not even it's like I think in US it's like this way, it's such a cutting word, but
Yeah,
I'm telling you in Australia it's, or in the UK, it's like, oh, it's just, it could be an adjective, a verb, a
yeah,
noun.
it's not even a profanity. They
Yeah,
don't even hold it as a profanity.
no.
I know. When you get to the gates, if there is such a thing as God, what do you want them to say?
Uh, Hell of a ride.
Hell of a
Hell
ride.
of a ride.
Good one. Final question, Jeremy. What are you grateful for?
Family, family, kids, wife, mother, stepfather, like yeah, brother, family.
Family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm always grateful to have the opportunity to get to know a new guest and have these conversations. Loved this conversation. Probably could have gone for another hour. And I want to say thank you. Like you, I am so grateful for my family, my wife, and the lifestyle that we've created and where I've come to in my life. And want to say thank you for joining me. And I hope we cross paths again real
Yeah, no,
soon.
I enjoy the dialogue, and I'd love to do it again. So yeah, it flew by. So
Thanks, Jeremy.
thank you.